Argentina lost the World Cup. Then it lost control of the conversation.
After the final against Spain, Argentina became the internet's main character. Accusations of racism, arrogance, and violence turned criticism of the national team into a broader pile-on against the country itself.
And just before we recorded, President Javier Milei turned that backlash into policy, signing an emergency decree that could bar or expel foreigners over hate speech against Argentines or attacks on national symbols.
We'll look at how criticism became a caricature and why the government seized on it politically, as well as why Milei once again seems eager to pick fights, including launching a diplomatic spat by insulting Brazil's President Lula at a time when his poll numbers are down.
And later, we'll look at an economy that keeps winning over investors while leaving many Argentines wondering when they'll feel the benefits.
I'm Francisco Aldaya, Argentina Bureau Chief at Bloomberg Linea.
And I'm Daniel Politi, contributor to the New York Times. We'll unpack all of that next on the July 2026 episode of the Argentina Brief. Thanks for joining us.
So Dan, what's the fresh news as we're recording this? What's all this about foreigners being able to be expelled from Argentina for what they say about Argentina?
Yeah, I mean, before we get into the World Cup, we should get into this latest news, which is this decree that Milei signed, emergency decree, that because it changes a bit the significance of the larger story we're going to be talking about. You know, the decree itself that President signed, surprising a lot of political observers, it basically lets Argentina bar or expel foreigners for hate speech against Argentines. Any incitement of violence, attacks on national symbols, for example, if someone were to burn the Argentine flag or something, that could be grounds for either being expelled from Argentina if they're here as visitors or as temporary residents, or directly impeding them from entering the country in the first place, right?
Right.
It doesn't formally, I mean, the government has been careful to say it doesn't affect political speech. So somebody that says Milei is an idiot, that wouldn't apply. It would have to be Argentine symbols and Argentina as a whole. Hate speech, really, is what
Extreme cases.
Extreme cases of hate speech.
So an apparent contradiction, right? Milei isn't exactly a nationalist per se, and restricting hate speech isn't very libertarian per se.
Yeah, I mean, him and his allies have always talked against this, even the concept of hate speech. And another little contradiction is that this is happening right before the government is trying to push Congress to make a modification to a law that puts a limit on how much land foreigners can buy in Argentina. So while it's trying to bar some foreigners, it's trying to make Argentina attractive to others, I guess. So definitely some contradictions there.
Right, and it's an emergency decree that arrives at a time when all of this sudden hate against Argentina after the World Cup loss was seemingly dying down, right? So
yeah, there was a lot of explosion on this issue, and then just as the world seemed to have turned the page, the government, the president seemed to want to bring it back into the forefront. Let's rewind and let's talk about what actually happened, right? I mean, after Argentina lost the World Cup, a lot of sadness. I think a lot of Argentines were really surprised by the vitriol that was directed at them, right? There was a lot of extreme cases of people insulting Argentina.
Myself included. I literally felt out of the blue. I couldn't understand why all of a sudden so much conversation and with so many different types of claims around Argentina, right? And its identity.
Yeah. I mean, let's look at one of the main examples that people talked about in these days. So here we have one of the main examples a lot of people were talking about in these days, which is Samuel L. Jackson, the famous Hollywood actor. He reposted a message that a group had posted that it shows Jackson's character in Django Unchained, the head house slave, wearing an Argentine jersey, and basically saying that's what black people would look like who support Argentina. That's what they look like, right? So it says, please not cheer or root for Argentina to win the FIFA World Cup. Argentina has historically been one of, if not the most racist countries in the world.
Just pretty flabbergasting is the word that I'd use. I don't know where this might have come from, because if I think like what are the most racist countries in the world, I don't think Argentina would be in the top 10.
Right, well, I mean, that's how a lot of Argentines felt. And, Samuel L. Jackson wasn't the only one. He wasn't alone. Eric Andre, the American comedian and actor, celebrated Argentina's loss with a expletive-laden post that read, "I'm glad these racist pieces of shit lost on a fucking international stage last night. Fuck you, Argentina, you fucking Nazi hiders. You're almost as racist as my country." He posted, this was, Samuel L. Jackson was basically a repost. This was his own post.
What did you think, like, as you read that for the first time? What thoughts came to your head?
I was like, whoa, wow, is this really? It just was so surprising, so much vitriol, because it was like, at the end of a football game, and it wasn't, and these are two actors, but also, politics got involved. There was a U.S. lawmaker in the House of Representatives that during a hearing basically said the world was rooting against Argentina because of Argentina's racist history.
Yeah, and I think a big question, the main question as we started seeing these incidents, right, on social media is, where is this coming from, right? What generated all of this?
Right, because it really did feel like people weren't just, celebrating Spain, which would be the normal thing after a World Cup. They were celebrating that Argentina had lost.
So the criticism, as we saw in these examples, began to expand quite rapidly beyond the world of football or soccer, or whatever you want to call it. Argentina's own racial identity came into the fray. The past receiving Nazis who escaped after the Second World War. Insults or teasing against Argentina for its poverty rate, its inflation rate, its currency weakness. I think also a factor that must have played into all of the hate that Argentina got was geopolitics, clearly. Whatever you think of Netanyahu and Trump, they're very polarizing figures, as Milei himself is. So there was, I think, much of that feeding into the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there was a lot of, talk about Argentina being an ally of Israel, and also a lot of old rivalries came into play, right? Brazil has this rivalry with Argentina that became a focus. Mexico has long hated Argentina in terms of soccer. So there was a lot of intra-Latin America spats, too, that sort of like grew seems to me, out of proportion, right? I think for a lot of Argentines, it felt out of proportion to the reality.
A lot of talk about Argentines being excessively arrogant, which I think people in the interior of the country tend to always react to, saying that's more people from Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
And, just Argentina's place in Latin America as a whole coming into the conversation, and our relationship not only with our immediate neighbors, but like you said, with countries like Mexico, countries like Colombia, with which Argentina played a Copa America final recently that ended up being very heated. So a ton of different variables feeding into what became sort of like a worldwide ganging up on Argentina, or at least what seemed like that.
Yeah, I think that's what it felt like to a lot of Argentines, for sure. But it's, as much as it shocked the Argentines, it didn't really come out of nowhere, right? The backlash was latching onto something that people had already recognized and people had been talking about throughout much of the World Cup. And maybe Argentines were just too busy enjoying watching the football tournament to really notice.
I think one side of the cause or the root causes behind all of this does have to do with football itself and Argentine recent history. For one thing, since 2022, when Argentina won that edition of the World Cup, there's been a lot of talk about FIFA favoring Argentina in terms of, Messi being a money-making machine and him needing a World Cup title to keep that money-making potential going in the near future. And then something that was more recent in this World Cup edition, at least, talk of Argentines being violent on the pitch, which isn't something that I have encountered in 30 plus years talking about football around the world, because I've lived in a couple of different countries. It's not a recurring theme that Argentines are particularly violent. So that was in this case
there were a few examples of Argentines being violent, right? Especially at the final, there was a fist fight there.
There was a fist fight. I think there is a reputation of Argentina being not so great losers. So the whole sore loser thing. There was an incident of violence with that brawl at the end of the Argentina-Spain game. The match against England was quite heated as well. Some pretty rough tackles. So I mean, there is something to grab a hold of to explain that part of the controversy. I just think it's not something that goes back into the past, right? As something to feed hatred towards Argentina.
I mean, beyond the pitch itself, though, this isn't the first time that Argentina has come under fire for its attitudes, its chants. I mean, it was 2 years ago, right? In 2024, the Argentine team, after winning Copa America, they became the subject of global news over some football chants that were, locally a lot of people talk about it as folklore and it's just teasing, but it's a racist chants really that have racist lyrics to them against black players in Europe, against France in particular, who they had won. So there is this history that has happened before that Argentina has been accused of racism. Just not this much, not with this kind of vehemence, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, like I think the chant, the main one, the one that went the most viral, that was still sung into this World Cup, was specifically against France, and it had to do with the fact that they play for France, is the actual direct quote from the chant, but they come from places like Angola, which shows a degree of ignorance in itself, because Angola was a Portuguese, not a French colony. But I mean, outside of Argentina or even, I guess, maybe Latin America, that would unanimously, I think, be labeled, if not racist, at least xenophobic, right? So there is truths or degrees of truth and nuance to this discussion. And, if we have a look at what Argentines sing at football stadiums, not just at the World Cup.
Yeah, so there is some, something that it was based on, but what's interesting about this thing, and I think what a lot of people reacted negatively to, is to how this criticism sort of became a caricature of the country, right? Suddenly Argentina isn't just a racist country, it's the most racist country in the world.
Yeah, as per Samuel L. Jackson and Eric Andre, literally saying that we're the most racist country in the world.
Yeah. I mean, and that led to some, in the middle of all this defensiveness and vitriol, there was a bit of, soul searching and a bit of interesting reflections, I think, that came out of this. I mean, one in particular that caught my eye was from this group, Identidad Marrón, that's an anti-racist organization in Argentina, that basically talked about how, yes, Argentina, and basically they would try to get to the nuance of it. They said, yes, Argentina is a racist country. It does have racism problems, but it's by far not the most racist country in the world.
Yeah, I think that's like the common ground. So
well, but let's get into like a bit of, because we don't want to adjudicate this issue, come up with a definite response. But I do think it's important to note that there's a lot of things that for Argentines may be normal that abroad may seem, at least may raise a few eyebrows. Let's put that right? Some local expressions that maybe aren't.
Yeah. I was telling you as we prepared this episode about a relatively common expression here, an idiom, if you will, that's blue eyes and blonde hair as something good, something positive, which, by, common sense and basic deduction means that the opposite of that would be bad, right? So that's something that we've been discussing, you and I, with regard to whether Argentina has more of a racism problem or a classism problem. And I think what we agreed is that it's more of a gray area in between those two, right?
Yeah, because I mean, I do think it's important to note that there is a complicated history around all this. In the late 1700s, there was a significant percentage of black population in Buenos Aires. That number plunged because of several factors that that have been explored. A lot of them having to do with racism, with the founding fathers of Argentina being, with today's measurement of racist. They wanted to promote European immigration in particular So there is that history.
Yeah, I mean, there's very specific, concrete examples in the text that those founding fathers like Alberdi and Sarmiento wrote, both talking about this Argentine arrogance abroad and having that reputation and being disliked by other countries within our continent, but also about, like you said, aiming at those Northern European migrants. They didn't hope for the Spaniards and the Italians.
It's true.
They wanted the Germans, the Englishmen. And just one excerpt from the author of the Constitution, who's Alberdi, during a trip to Brazil, he made note of the fact that there were so many black people in Brazil, and that it wouldn't be something desirable for Argentina. So again, there's a long history here. There clearly are some racist elements to trace back to those days. I would definitely not say that those sentiments are widely held today.
Well, I mean, I think that's what a lot of people try to push back against this caricature, and they try to point to actual, facts about attitudes towards this. And there's an interesting value voter survey. It's called. It's this basically the survey that's done around the world, and what it shows is that Argentines are among the least likely to care if their neighbor is of a different race, for example, or if their neighbor is an immigrant. Much less likely to care than people in countries who were criticizing Argentina before this, right? There was this, and that's what a lot of Argentines seized on, this, how hypocritical it was to be hearing Americans talk about Argentina being the most racist country in the world, or Europe that has colonial powers,
Yeah, and I think just to conclude this segment, we should watch a video from a Brazilian news coverage of the aftermath of the Argentina loss, which was quite controversial and went quite viral in Brazil. But I think it goes to show that many, obviously, influencers and people on social media latched onto this and tried to get some engagement out of it, which is something that legacy media does do, right? And I think they blew out of proportion here something that maybe isn't exactly a case of racism. But
let's watch it, and then we can talk about it.
Perdimos la final. Pero mira lo que es esto. Mira lo que es esto, hermano. Mira lo que es esto. Esto es Argentina, mono. Esto es Argentina. Acá.
So did you catch that? He said, "Esto es Argentina, mono," which is what the person says. Like that. And mono obviously means monkey. And the Brazilian reporter says outright that he didn't realize what he had said. He only saw it afterwards. He only heard that word afterwards, and he did a whole segment on how he was the victim of racism in Argentina over this. That obviously, this immediately caused a lot of controversy on social media. Basically, some Argentines saying that this evidently happy person who was celebrating, who was having a beer in his hand, maybe was a bit hoarse, and he meant to say hermano, and it came out sounding like mono. And there were others who said, no, wait, hold on. There's in a lot of parts of Argentina, mono is an affectionate term. That has
a term of endearment.
A term of endearment that has nothing to do with race. And why I particularly like this, I don't really like it, but why I like this clip to exemplify things is because it shows how it seems like people a lot of times are talking different languages, people. And I think that's what offended a lot of Argentines, that a lot of people would come in with their own values. And yes, calling somebody a monkey in Brazil is punishable by law for a good reason. They have, because of their history and all that. That's not the same thing here. So suddenly coming here and trying to apply those same standards sort of rubbed people the wrong way. Yeah, this is not the first time we've seen these sort of controversies explode before, like being raised before, but it seemed to have reached a new level now, right? It exploded now to a degree that we hadn't seen before. And why do you think that might be?
So part of this clearly has to do with social media algorithms, but not just social media algorithms, because if you look at legacy outlets as well, they tend to focus on the negative news, right? The one that the news stories that'll attract the most eyeballs. And that's clearly how social media has been designed, and it's going to favor dissent, it's going to favor disagreement, it's going to favor clashes, it's going to favor insults. And, people jump on the bandwagon to get that engagement. I think if you look at what Samuel L. Jackson and Eric Andre said, I really doubt they know what they're talking about entirely, right? If you're accusing Argentina of being the most racist country in the world, you're clearly sort of in the dark about a lot of this.
Well, but I mean, at least the government, insisted this was a coordinated campaign. It blamed basically the international left as a whole, but specifically naming the Brazilian government, the Mexican governments. They said that there was a coordinated campaign against Argentina, right? This anti-Argentina campaign. There's been independent research on this that has actually suggested otherwise, right? That this was an organic conversation. That there were a lot of Brazilian participants, for example, in this conversation, but it was an organic conversation and not a directed one. But, the government seemed to want to change immigration law as a result of this. It sort of seemed to want to take a stab at putting this into the broader cultural war argument that Milei has proposed ever since he became president, ever since he was a candidate. The government seems determined to once again take control of the conversation by basically turning criticism into political confrontation. And it wasn't just about the World Cup. There's been other examples in recent weeks. In July, basically what we talked about a little bit in the cold open, we teased, which was the Lula spat, which is Milei traveled to São Paulo for the launch of Flavio Bolsonaro's presidential campaign, and while there, he gave a speech in which he called Lula bald trash. He said he was a thief, a convict, and attacked what he called Brazil's socialist government. And this is Argentina attacking the president of its main commercial partner, its main trade partner.
Yeah, I think that this conflict, which ended up in Brazil calling its ambassador in Argentina, so it escalated quite a bit, kind of unprecedented in the bilateral relations, at least from the 20th century onwards, was that Milei was prohibited from visiting Jair Bolsonaro, Flavio's father, former president of Brazil, by the Brazil justice system, and also the fact that Milei had some grievances against Lula for visiting Kristina at her home arrest, and holding up a sign saying Kristina should be free, basically. So,
yeah, I mean, and Lula, made no secret of the fact that he wanted Milei's opponent in the election to win. I mean, that is true, and that's how the government's sort of saying this isn't as big of a deal as a lot of people are making it out to be. But it is significant that he chose these words while in Brazil against the sitting Brazilian president, right? And it's not the only example that we have of when Milei is facing a very delicate moment in the polls. I mean, there's this very key poll that we're going to see right now. We're going to start with this, the Torquato de Tela Government Confidence Index that, just say it first, it's a very reliable poll. It's one that it's seen as the gold standard in polls of government approval ratings in Argentina because it's been continuing for a very long time. So we have a very long series and it equates pretty well with election results. And the results from June were really bad news for the government. Index fell 6.5% from June to July. You see this big dip here. And it's down 21% since last year. So that's quite a lot, and confidence declined in 6 of the first 7 months of this year. Except for June, in every month of this year, confidence in the government has declined. So since the end of 2025, that confidence has declined 21.5%.
Yeah, and just looking at this set of data going back to Néstor Kirchner, right? Mm-hmm. The general trend is that you don't really see a major improvement after month 31 in office, which is the latest result. You need something sort of extraordinary to change the general perception of your government to see that major improvement. The big exception, which was sort of something uncontrollable, which happened during Kristina Kirchner's first government, right near the end, was Néstor Kirchner's death. That's the only exception from this data set that shows a major improvement towards the latter half of an administration.
Yeah, and I think that we've talked a lot before in this podcast the Macri comparison between Milei and former President Mauricio Macri, and right now at the respective points in the presidency, Milei is below where Macri was. So in the presidency, but there's two key indicators that I wanted us to focus on as part of this poll that I think are particularly important. One has to do with young people. Among those aged 18 to 29. Confidence fell 23% in July. So that's important. Why? Because that group was particularly key for Milei's victory in the presidential election. And that might suggest that young people are particularly disenchanted by what's been happening. And there's also been a great fall in the support of the government in the greater Buenos Aires area, which, as we know, is the big battleground in any presidential election. And so here I just put up a new chart, which is the Consumer Confidence Index, which has also shown a big decline, right, Fran?
Yeah, so mid-year 2025, we had that big change in the central bank policy, which made for a lot of interest rate volatility. Interest rates in pesos went way up, and that's part of the explanation as to why we're seeing bank loans go bad so much, right? And that's affected consumption. And it's been an index that's been going down for the last several months, most of 2026.
Yeah, I mean, the Consumer Confidence Index, shows how confident consumers are and they to keep spending. But it's not the only sign that we have that the mood in the country is souring. There's also something called the Citizen Optimism Index, which is basically a measurement of social mood, and it's plunged. It plunged in July by 9%. It's been plunging very much this year, and it's at its lowest level since February 2024. So it shows how, basically suggests, I shouldn't say shows, but suggests that people are just becoming less optimistic about what the future holds. And obviously, in politics, if you lose optimism, you lose voters. There was this idea of voters feeling like we're doing badly, but we're going somewhere good. This pain will be worth it. And it seems like these polls are maybe suggesting that a lot fewer people are believing that these days.
Yeah, and I always go back to the October midterms from last year and the surprise result, right? Because Milei wasn't doing too well in most of the polls at that time, but it seemed like the electorate, that core 40%, his base, were willing to be patient, right? And if we think that over the next 15 or so months things may stabilize and start to recover a bit, there's still enough time for a change in that.
Yeah, we're definitely still far away from elections, and all this could still change, but it's interesting this is happening right as, Milei is taking on this more nationalistic approach. He's upping the ante, fighting more. Doesn't necessarily explain the fights, but maybe it could be, it could show that he thinks that this aggressive stance could be politically useful for him, as it was when he became president, especially now that there's no united opposition to combat.
I think that confrontation may be tactically reasonable or sort of positive for Milei, but I don't think it's, currently it's not the main thing to watch. I think the main thing to watch is, will Milei ultimately be able to or not get consumption going again and get jobs and wages above where they were before he took office, which still hasn't happened.
Right. I mean, people aren't feeling improvements, right? But it's funny because it's like people aren't feeling improvements in the economy. They're still suffering, but the big investor head honchos are betting on Argentina, right? We've seen a lot of that this past month.
So Moody's was the final of the 3 rating agencies that upgraded Argentina. I think we should mention or emphasize that Argentina is coming out of a very low ranking, right? Next to default or selective default. So it's still the 16th worst ranking out of like 21 or 24, I think, from Moody's, which is applicable to the other 2 rating agencies. But still, it's a clear improvement. It's getting out of the C level category and moving up to the B category. And the day after that decision, Argentine assets did rally a bit, which took some investors by surprise and analysts because, they thought it's already been factored into the prices. The other two, this is the third one that's obviously going to do it as well. Mm-hmm. But they still rallied a bit. We have country risk near 8-year lows still, around 450 basis points. And companies are still making large investment announcements and getting those announcements within the RIGI benefit scheme approved. Mm-hmm. So in recent weeks, we had Pampa Energia announcing a big fertilizer plant using the gas from the shale gas from Vaca Muerta to produce urea. And
Argentina also got a big vote of confidence from the big financial head honchos in Washington this month, right?
Yeah. So Kristalina Georgieva was in Buenos Aires, a historic...
The IMF chief.
Yeah, historic visit for an IMF chief, considering that the last time one visited Argentina was in the G20 summit in 2018. So Christine Lagarde didn't come specifically to visit Argentina, but to attend that summit. So I mean, it was a visit, I think, that left two main conclusions for me. The IMF is worried about what we were just discussing, which is what we've been discussing on this podcast as well, which is the two-speed economy, jobs, wages, because they want to see that these policies have continuity because they want to be paid, right? Argentina took out this loan in 2018 for the first time. It's only risen, the total debt that Argentina owes the IMF. So Kristalina wants to see that this government has chances of being reelected.
I mean, this is to know, no other country owes more money to the IMF than Argentina, right?
Exactly. And one day was in Buenos Aires where there was this news conference answering only 3 questions, one of which was a Bloomberg Linea question.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. And the next day she went to Vaca Muerta. She had before I go on to that, she had dinner with 10 business leaders in Buenos Aires. And then the next day she went to Vaca Muerta, which is Argentina's new cash cow, right? So she wants to see firsthand, side by side with Luis Caputo and Horacio Marin from YPF, the main producer of oil and gas in Argentina. She wants to see the place where the dollars will come from that will go to pay that IMF debt.
There were some fun images of Kristalina Georgieva in oil wells, right? Sort of handling YPF machines. But before that, something that really caught my eye was what you mentioned before was the IMF chief in the economy ministry answering questions from reporters. I mean, just the optics of having the IMF chief answer questions as at a time when a lot of people accuse the IMF of running the Argentine economy. I don't know, that seemed to rub a lot of people the wrong way, don't you think?
I think, like I was saying earlier, the Argentine government, Milei, Caputo, don't care about winning over votes from progressive or leftist Argentines. They are fully confident in this strategy of preaching to their own electorate, and that worked in 2023, so it'll work now. So that's pretty much, I think, the response. It'll rub many people the wrong way. That 40% that will clearly vote for either a Macri-type option or a Milei-type option doesn't see it as something negative.
Well, but even if they don't care about, the progressive view of these things, I mean, they must care about the average Argentine, right? I mean, how the average Argentine is doing. And as I understand it, at least the latest data, at least suggests that the average Argentine isn't doing so hot.
Yeah, and I think that's the main reason Georgieva seemed to be concerned. I mean, she made a clear point that revealing that in her discussions with Caputo during this visit, the main point of discussion was the sectors that are not doing too well and that are crucial for employment. So construction, industry, manufacturing, that is. So, I mean, Kristalina Georgieva sees that on the other side of the political spectrum, the other main candidate going into 2027, at least with what we know today, is Axel Kicillof,
the Buenos Aires governor.
And Axel Kicillof might be at loggerheads with the more hardline Kirchnerites like Christina Kirchner's son, Maximo Kirchner. But we're talking about a part of the Argentine political spectrum that talks about defaulting or restructuring again with private bond holders, and God knows what they have in mind for the IMF debt, right? Which is going to be between $7 and $11 billion per year that we have to give back up to, I think, 2034. So it's only reasonable that Georgieva wants to see that these sectors that are so crucial for what we mentioned and clearly for votes ticking back up again.
Yeah, because for so far, at least, the latest data continues to show wages are not improving. They still haven't caught up with inflation, and unemployment, although not high, is increasing.
No, it's not high by international or even regional standards, but it's about 2 points higher than when it was where it was in at the end of 2023. And I think the government has a reasonable argument to say that they've done a massive adjustment of the economy and it's only gone up 2 points, and it's a transitional phase where all of the investment announcements, and as they roll in, that'll create jobs.
So far, but it's not just obviously unemployment, it's also quality of jobs has decreased.
Yes.
High quality jobs are on decline. There's more self-employed, more under the table work than before. And there's also another stat that's worrying a lot of economists and government figures too, right? Let's look at that now. So here we have this charge on household bad loans and how it's been climbing, right? And you see this line is very steep.
Yeah, quite a bit of a massive spike. I think that the context that we have to give here is that loans were pretty much non-existent in Argentina over the last 6-7 years or so, where banks started lending to the government rather than lending to the private sector. And there was such high inflation that people became accustomed to you take out a loan at a fixed rate, not a variable rate, and inflation will have its way with what you owe, right? It'll end up making what you have to pay, much easier to handle. And that's not the case anymore because inflation's going down and not up. So there's a question of habits, right?
Right, but let's talk about the number itself, right? The loans are going up, the bad loans are going up, delinquencies are up.
Yeah, so beyond the explanation of why they went up, it's a data point that, calls into question how much can loans recover before the elections and maybe even this year, considering that bankers that I talked to in the first quarter of the year were saying, no, it's the worst of the situation will have passed by the end of this quarter. And then they said, okay, no, maybe second quarter will be the peak. And now we have our doubts, right? The journalists that cover the financial sector as to whether
really hit bottom.
Yeah.
It's keep increasing because there's also been an increase a lot of loans from digital wallets and things like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, so banks' bad loans are at their highest since the 2001 crisis. So it's been a long time since we've seen something like this. Mm-hmm. And it's even worse in digital wallets like Naranja X, Mercado Pago, Wala, where for some reason I think maybe the lending rates may have been a bit more accessible to people. And banks,
it's very easy to get a loan from Mercado Pago or something. You just press a button, and maybe at one time you need to buy food. You don't have enough money. You get a loan, and then suddenly you're stuck with this huge interest rate and a loan that keeps increasing in cost.
Yeah,
right?
and banks were way more cautious. So if you look at these like digital wallets, you're talking about NPLs, so non-performing loans, at as much as like 40% of total loans. And then you look at traditional banks, and it's more like 6 or 7%, because they also lend to companies. Those loans tend to go sour way less than lending to people. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on, because it limits not only how people feel, but just general consumption metrics, right? So if you have no credit to people will spend less.
But after all this negative talk, let's change tacks a little bit and talk a little bit about something positive that is actually surprising that you wrote about recently that raised a lot of eyebrows and caught a lot of people off guard, right?
Yeah, even the government that I sort of asked about this development in the tourism data, and they weren't even aware of it themselves.
So what was the development?
So the tourism from people coming from countries that that don't have a border with Argentina is at a record high. It was something like 1.2 million between January and May of this year, and if you compare it to the period where you would have thought it was way higher, which was the same 5 months of 2023, where there was this huge FX gap that made going out to eat in Argentina, traveling in Argentina, super cheap if you had euros or dollars. It was 40% less in that time frame, which is peak season for tourism to Argentina. From December to about March is the peak season. So
yeah, it's very counterintuitive, right? Because we've been talking a lot about how increasing costs in Argentina. Argentina is very expensive for tourists. That means that tourism has plunged, but it turns out that it's plunged from neighboring countries, but from the rest of the world, it's increasing.
Yeah, so it plunged from neighboring countries because people in Uruguay, for example, or Chile would cross over the border, do their shopping at supermarkets, fill up the tank for gas, because it was way cheaper because of what we mentioned about the exchange rate. But what the government was telling me, trying to explain how this may have happened, is that the long distance tourist cares way less about. It's still probably cheaper in comparison to where they come from in the US or in Europe, most things, or cheaper or the same price level. And they're aiming for more of the luxury tourist.
Right.
So a couple of more things to mention here. There was more flights added. There was, for the first time, a direct flight from China. You have more easier visa restrictions. And
what's interesting is that we started this episode talking about hate towards Argentina, but it seems like there may be a lot of hate towards Argentina, but a lot of people want to come here.
Yeah, easier entry specifically for Chinese, Indian, and Caribbean tourists, which wasn't the case before this government. And then just a lot of marketing campaigns in these markets that they're targeting. So apparently people value the relative safety of visiting Argentina, the diverse travel experiences. You have like the snow in the mountains, the wine region. Buenos Aires itself is beautiful to visit. So a surprising but understandable trend.
Nice. We're joined by Ali Lazar, food journalist, creator of Pick Up the Fork, who's here to join us to talk about the fun side of life. Ali, welcome. How you doing?
I don't know how fun I'm feeling right now, but
why are you not feeling fun?
It's been a weird month.
It has been a weird month. We talked a lot about the anti-Argentina hate.
Yeah, it's really gotten to me. I mean, between that and the weather, the grayness. I wish I could bring a bit more cheer, but
what about your friends like from the US? Were they hating on Argentina?
Yeah, my own brother. I'm like,
what?
Judas, what the hell? He wrote me and he's like, I'm not. He like wasn't rooting for Argentina. It's like, how could you not? He's like, I want the underdog to win. I'm like, underdog? We as I'm an Argentine, as I'm not, but we are the underdog.
I mean, that's fair enough, though. I mean, if he may be wrong about the underdog thing, but he's not hating on Argentina, right?
I mean, he didn't like the way the team played. He thought not just him. I think it's what you guys have probably talked about before, just the general sense of their unsportsmanlike thugs. I've heard
the behavior on the pitch.
Yeah, that whole anti-Argentine vibe. So it kind of got to me.
It got to you, but interestingly, at a time when you had a very significant anniversary, right, of living in Argentina.
Yeah. So usually I go north for the winter, and this year because of the World Cup and because this was my 20th year anniversary in Argentina, so I decided to stay 2 decades. Yeah, I got here in 2006, and so I was like, you know what, this is like I want to be here.
And you actually sort of, I don't know if this is what inspired you, but you ended up writing sort of a love letter to Argentina. Maybe that's an exaggeration on my part, but sort of an explanation of why you live here.
Yeah, I think most foreigners who live in Argentina, we get a similar question a lot, and it's like the 2 questions that I get most. Like the first one is, where are you from? I open my mouth and like, where de donde sos? And then the second one is, why do you live here? And it's usually like asked in a way with like, you know, it's like they have their hand up like this, like, ¿por qué vivís acá? Like, if you could live anywhere, why would you choose here? And over the years, I like never really had a good answer. Like, I didn't really know what to say. And so and I wrote an article about just kind of figuring out, well, why do I live here? And so
some soul searching,
yeah, and like and questioning like, well, what is it about Argentina? Why do I live here? Why do I keep coming back if I could live in other parts of the world?
So you wrote this for your Substack, for your newsletter.
I did, yes.
Without giving any spoilers, why do you live here?
Well, you got to read it to find out.
And subscribe, right?
You got to subscribe, and yeah. No, I think the overall. I mean, what I overall got to was it was, you know, it's difficult to put into one quick answer. Why does anyone live anywhere? And what was interesting about it was I was able to see that, like, no matter, Argentina has, you know, many beautiful things. Like any place in the world, there's pros, there's cons. And for me, whenever I traveled or went anywhere else, the pros were always come back to Argentina, and something said go back to BA, and I would always miss it a lot when I was away. And even the things that perhaps other people might think were negative, for me, that's what I missed. And overall, I mean, I'll give you a quick spoiler. It's just like the relationships that I have here, I think, and the focus on friendships and instead of work life, and that kind of balance, which I don't think happens in other places in the world, and the spontaneity of being in the city, and the chaos and the addiction to that. And so I think that, you know, that's.
And what was the response like? Did you get good response to your?
I got a really nice response. It was actually, talking about being in a bad mood, that like really put me in a better mood. It was very heartwarming. I got a mix of responses from a lot of people that foreigners that used to live in Argentina that moved back to the States that would say, you know, one woman said, you know, you're so brave I always wanted to stay in Argentina, but I never could. You're so brave. And in my head, I'm thinking she like moved back to the States and has like a real job and started a family. I'm like, that's brave, you know? Yeah. So there's that. And then there's people, Argentines that thanked me for because right now, especially everyone's like talking so much shit about Argentina. Yeah. They're like thanking me for, wow, like it's so nice to have people that really see the beautiful things about it. And people that understand, because not everyone understands. It's not an easy place to live or understand. And so the people that do, it's like you're part of a special secret society.
I was going to say, you know, it's a different sort of case for me because I am Argentine and I moved back, but my 2 brothers stayed in London.
Yeah.
I always get the question, why did you come back?
And what's your answer?
I think it's just a case of my roots pulling me back. I've always felt very Argentine every time I came to visit. Going to like a Boca Juniors stadium and like, you know, chanting with all of the rest of the fans, like it just made me feel very Argentine, and not having people mispronounce my name and you know, just the belongingness of it was, I think, the main reason for me, the family. And I think you hit on a super important point coming back from London. Obviously I was 21, so I didn't have the working experience in London, but going back to visit, I get the comment from my brother often that they really see the whole work-life friendship balance thing.
Yeah.
Much higher on the friendship side here in Argentina, whereas in London, everyone's super sort of like very career-oriented.
Yeah, I find a lot of Argentines that live abroad, that's a really difficult thing to adapt to. It's that difference. And I actually, funny enough, there's an Argentine living in my neighborhood. Like I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, and an Argentine lives there and befriended my uncle. my uncle's like 90 and this guy's like in his 40s, and they do this. My uncle goes over to his house for asados, and he misses like that kind of thing. So he created this kind of community in this suburb of Chicago, which I think is funny. But yeah, so it was nice. And I also one other thing that I liked to kind of I thought about a lot was this big contradiction that between the complaining about Argentina all the time and then having this like crazy patriotism and love for Argentina. So that was another thing that I found where it was a lot of nice feedback about that too.
I mean, without maybe this wasn't what you meant to do, but it sort of seems like you created sort of like an antidote to all this negative. At the time when a lot of people were talking negatively about Argentina, you spoke positively. You said about your own experience and why you loved this place so much.
Yeah, because then I was really online. Like I was starting to get really like it was getting to my head. Like I felt really bad about it, and then I had to like change my algorithm. Thank God for Jimothy you guys know about Jimothy the raccoon?
I do not.
I won't go in there, but thank God for some random the other random holes you can go to on the internet, because it was just all so negative and everyone had their hot take on it, and it was just like, okay, I kind of want to ignore that and like, okay, why, what do we love about this place?
So besides changing up your algorithm and all that, how have you been combating the winter blues in Argentina?
I've been going to a lot of cafes, and so I've been every day. It was like gray and rainy. So I'm like, okay, I work from home. And so I went to a different cafe every day, and I started being like, okay, well now I'm going to write about cafes, and I would write a little bit from cafes, just like watching people watch and do that. And I went to some cool places.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Like which ones?
Okay, so this was just Chacarita, and I know everyone's like, go, you have to leave your neighborhood, but it was gray and rainy, so I didn't. I'll expand my horizons to other neighborhoods. But some good places I went to was Docena, and they have really good Turkish eggs, and they also do really good midday specials.
What are Turkish eggs?
Yeah,
Huevos turcos.
I was scared to ask.
You're like, yeah, Turkish eggs.
Because last time I didn't know about the milanesa canadiense.
La
Maryland.
Go on.
Still doesn't know. You gotta try it. Next time you see it on the menu, try it.
But what are huevos turcos?
No, I was gonna say try the Maryland, but yeah, Turkish eggs. Okay, so Turkish eggs, huevos turcos. So it's like a thick Middle Eastern Greek, like a yogurt, kind of like Greek yogurt. And they have za'atar, which is a Middle Eastern spice, and on that with eggs, and it's on like a fried pita. It's really good for breakfast. It's like
interesting.
Yeah,
sounds good.
It is good. I mean, I feel like a lot of breakfast stuff. It's like I could make this at home, and I don't want to spend this much money when I can make scrambled eggs. But when it's worth it, and they also do really good facturas like Vigilante. There's also Hobby Coffee Shop, which is near me, that do really good salads, and it's hard to do a good salad. And they come and when they bring it out, they have these beautiful ceramic bowls. And honestly, I was watching it come out of the kitchen, and everyone who ordered it, I watched their face like go, ooh. So I was like, oh, wow.
Visually impressive food is always nice.
Yeah. And then a classic that's near me, which is not a great place to work, but what I liked about it's in Chacarita, the Antique Photo Museum. If you guys have the Antique Camera Museum, CIMIC, it's called. It's on the corner of, I don't remember what streets, but I can say later. So CIMIC, it's like this antique camera place, and I think probably the average age must be 75, but it's like it's like you don't find any of the Chacarita people so much in there. You find the viejos reading the paper and drinking a cortado.
The legacy Chacarita people.
Legacy Chacarita people. It's like the old school coffee shop. I wouldn't order a coffee there because the coffee's not very good.
So what is good there?
I got tostado, like jamón y queso with a fresh squeezed orange juice. Nice. And that was really good. Classic. And it's like a great people watching place.
Nice. So is your plan to expand this list? Are we going to be...
Yeah. So I want to like do every neighborhood eventually. I don't know every neighborhood, but try to expand to different ones. Because I remember at a time when it was impossible to find even one decent cup of coffee in the city. And now it's like there's specialty coffees on every single corner. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. Every time I go away for even like a few weeks, I come back and there's new places that open.
It's the new craft beer place.
Yeah, I know.
Which has died down quite a bit.
Right. They swapped it.
But I hope the coffee thing doesn't die down because it's great to have.
You're a big coffee fan too, right?
Big coffee fan, and it's great to have a lot of options. Right?
Yeah.
That's true.
And taste and change our taste, because before it's like you would have this burnt coffee, and now
We just had a YPF coffee before coming here.
Oh, it was delicious. How's that?
Biggest coffee seller in the country.
Wow.
But yeah, not
And?
very good coffee.
Not great.
Would you
Not recommended.
not recommended?
We won't have them as sponsors of the podcast. I don't
Well, maybe we should.
I'm
we love YPF. It's so delicious.
Great gas as well.
Sandwiches. Mm.
So beyond coffee shops, what do you have on your recommendation roster for us this month?
Oh yes, recommendations. Well, I have a feeling that I'm not sure that our audience would be so into this, but I'm going to recommend this anyways for anyone that's into queer nightlife. I went to a party called Travestia, which was a ton of drag queens, and it was one of the most fun parties that I've been to in a really long time. The production level was incredible. It was great music. It was at Niceto. And I keep thinking about it. And it was last month.
It was a bit. I mean, it's a bit of a. It made a comeback, right? It was a party that had become big pre-pandemic, and then after the pandemic sort of died down, and now they came back, and apparently it was a big hit. I didn't go, but you had a great time.
I had so much fun. One of the best times I've had in a really long time. And Buenos Aires just has a really great queer nightlife scene. So that's my rec.
Nice. My rec for the month is this. It's a restaurant called Social Corazon. It's a new restaurant in Palermo by the makers of El Preferido and Don Julio, two very big name, very expensive restaurants. They opened up a much more casual eatery called Social Corazon that has at its heart, it's a bakery, and it's open all day. So you can go for breakfast, you can go for lunch, dinner. It's really reasonably priced. And it's good quality food. So I'd highly recommend it for.
What would you recommend to eat?
I mean, I really liked, for breakfast, I really liked their eggs, which are not made in the way that I could make them, which I also think that's a good sign for eggs. But particularly, I really like their pastas. Their pastas are not Italian pastas. They make a point of saying these are the Argentine-style pastas. And this ravioli with estofado that really reminds me of what the pastas that my grandmother used to make, just like with ravioli with a big chunk of meat in it, which is very non-Italian. I think Italians would
that sounds good. I want that now.
It was really good. It's like they make the big plate of ravioli with this big chunk of meat that's like made in the oven, cooked all night. So it's really like this really tender meat. Highly recommend it.
I'm gonna recommend a cafe and representing the north zone of Buenos Aires once again. One that reminds me a lot of my days living in Palermo. You're starting to see much more of this in San Isidro. It's called Pasión, and it's just a very nice cafe that you can have some great eggs, some toast with smoked salmon, that sort of thing. It's very nicely decorated, so recommend it.
And good coffee.
Great coffee.
Important.
Better than YPF.
Better than YPF, yes.
Could be their slogan.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us, Ali. Thanks, everyone, for joining us once again in the Argentina Brief. And see you next month.
Yeah, thanks so much. And we'll put in the recommendations in the show notes so you can find them.
Good call. Till next month.